Hello there and welcome to another episode of the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast. Joining me as usual is my right hand man, Mr. Felipe.
Hello everyone. We're not starting with a beer today. Got coffee.
And that's a quick made espresso, man.
Yeah.
It's going to overtake it.
Cheers, Laz.
Cheers for you. Let's get the episode started.
Espresso. Yeah, today's episode, I'm leading the episode, if I can say it like that. Yeah, because it's about one of my favourite all-time rock bands. How many times have I said that? You know, how many favourite bands do I have?
And funnily enough, a band I'm actually not familiar with at all.
And that's the other thing about the show. We like talking about stuff that one of us doesn't know much about, because that's how we get to, find out about new bands or old bands that we want to get familiar with. So we're going to talk about Yes.
Sounds good to me.
So
to clear up any confusion, the English prog rock band called Yes.
Yes.
Exactly.
But interesting thing, I want to start from the end, from the most relevant current event. It's really sad that literally yesterday Alan White died. He was Yes drummer for ages. He was their drummer since the fourth album, if I'm not wrong.
Wow.
And also played with John Lennon. So Alan White is one of the most accomplished rock drummers in history for sure. And he sadly left this world on the day before we're recording this. I don't know when you guys are going to be listening to this, but it's we recording on the day after Alan White's death.
That's tragic.
He died at the age of 72 in America.
That's not bad. That's a good full life, isn't it?
Yeah, well, he lived a great life, isn't it? He played with John Lennon and Eric Clapton.
Was I a session guy?
As a session guy,
Wow.
And George Harrison. So I'm going to start by telling one of his stories, because one really, really remarkable thing about Yes is the fact that every musician in the band could be playing with anyone. They would be the perfect session musicians for any other musician or any other band, and they really they're fantastic players and fantastic performers who happen to be in this amazing band. And Yes had no less than 19 full-time members. Since the band
19.
Yes.
And how many would normally be in the band at one time?
5.
Okay.
They had.
So they had potentially 4 different lineups.
Exactly. They actually
Wow.
had a lineup with 8 musicians, which is pretty much 2 bands together combined.
Oh my God, yeah.
2 drummers, 2 keyboard players, etc. But we're going to get into that. So to talk about Alan White first. So
Tell us the story.
Yeah. So he was a session musician in the UK, and he got invited by John Lennon to play a gig, and he first thought it was a prank. He's got this phone call from John Lennon himself saying,
Hello, Alan. How you doing this evening?
that's Laz's impersonation of John. So basically John called him and said, I think his wife called him, saying, there's a guy named John on the phone. I don't know.
A guy named John.
And he got the phone and he was like, is John Lennon here? I said, oh, really? Come on. And then he finally figured out it was actually John Lennon, and John Lennon invited him for a gig. Said, okay, the gig's in 2 days or something, and it's me and Eric Clapton. And they rehearsed on the airplane.
No.
Yeah, because they had no time to get together in the studio, so they rehearsed on the airplane. And story goes that no one complained about people making noise on the airplane, because we're talking about Alan White, John Lennon and Eric Clapton. So would you complain if those guys were rehearsing?
No, you'd be getting
the
a
same
free
flight
gig,
as you.
Yeah. It's a free show from three of the best musicians and songwriters in the world.
Yeah, and he also joined Yes in the same sort of condition. He joined the band when they were really famous, and he had 3 days to learn the set list. And we're not talking about learn 2.5 minute pop songs, are we?
We're talking anything between 5 and 20 minute songs.
Exactly.
With odd time signatures, key changes, time changes. Bloody hell, 3 days. That's a huge task.
It's an amazing accomplishment again. And he was cool. He was famous for being just cool. Get into the vibe, get the job done.
Yeah.
And and everyone was happy with him. So yeah, Alan White, one of my favorite drummers for sure. I loved his style, like really solid groove. And he was one of the only members who stayed in the band with all those lineup changes. And here's the thing though, what do you think about Yes? You're not very familiar with him. What do you think? What defines Yes for you?
It's really interesting because, funnily enough, prog seems to be the one music genre that I haven't paid attention to, but only in the fact because, in the literal sense, I don't have time. The songs are so long that if I want to go and listen to a Yes album or a Genesis album or an Emerson, Lake and Palmer album, it's something you've got to put aside an hour for. And I don't often have a free hour. Sometimes I can do a pop album in the car, on the way to this, that and the other, So, but with Yes, I found I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would, knowing that I was going into listening to a prog band. What I found, so Felipe gave me a few albums to listen to. You told me the essential ones were Fragile, Close to the Edge, 90125. So I listened to the first two fully. I've listened to the highlights, supposedly, of 90125. And what I found interesting was that, especially with songs like with the albums like Fragile and Close to the Edge, the pure variety of music genres you're hearing within each song. Now, the time signature changes, the keyboard solos, the instrumentation used, it is prog music, that's obvious. But within those songs, I'd say in every song on the Close to the Edge album, each song had one section within the song that was funky, that you could dance to. Each song had one section which had vocals that could be in a pop song. Because lovely, easy melodies, beautifully sung, an accessible voice. And then the rest of the songs are all proggy and wonderful solos by Rick Wakeman. I was just surprised that there were so many agreeable moments in each song. Because as you know with prog, as we said on the Emerson, Lake and Palmer episode, it can become what we call, in the music world, wanky. Which is where you try and just play notes for the sake of it. But I was
self-indulgent.
Self-indulgent, but I was so surprised how, like I said, I'm going to repeat myself, how accessible a lot of moments in each of the songs were.
I think they managed to sound like soundtrack. A friend of mine in school said to me, I don't like Yes because they sound like video game soundtracks. I said, well, isn't that cool? That you can you can play something that is so hard to play, so musically complex, and it still sounds like a video game soundtrack, which means it's entertaining. I think it is. And there's something about it we need to consider. How can a band last for that long and change lineup pretty much every 2 albums? You mentioned Fragile and Close to the Edge, and they were released one after the other, so that is the same lineup, and it's one of the old.
Is that their classic lineup, isn't it?
Yes, that's the classic lineup.
So I did do some notes. So that lineup is. Do you want to tell us?
That's...
okay. You know.
Well, I would say, to be honest, that's the classic lineup.
So the classic lineup would be John Anderson on vocals,
Chris Squire on bass,
Bill Bruford on drums,
Steve Howe on guitar,
and Rick Wakeman on keys, right?
That's it.
So that is the famous classic lineup.
Yes, although shortly after Close to the Edge, Alan White joined the band. So that lineup probably did more stuff together with the same lineup you just mentioned, but with Alan White instead of Bill Bruford. The interesting thing is, Alan White plays in a completely different style than Bill Bruford, and Tony Kaye, who was the first keyboard player, is completely different from Rick Wakeman. And
I did read that they got Rick Wakeman in because, did you say Tony Kaye?
Tony Kaye.
Tony Kaye was very reluctant to play electric keyboards.
Yeah, he was more into piano and Hammond.
Yeah.
Right? He didn't want to do Moog, he didn't want to do
the synth and all that
synth
stuff.
And all the more.
So that's why they got
Rick
Wakeman in, right?
Exactly. So here's the thing. What makes the history of Yes really interesting is the fact that they changed lineup so many times, but the music was still there, and there's still some sort of personality to it that stands the survived all the lineup changes and all the stuff that happened to them. So I'm gonna quote Rick Wakeman on this because there's a great documentary which I have watched no joking, about 20 times
Really?
when I was young. I was a fanatic for prog rock. So yeah, I watched it in VHS, but I recommend it. It's called Yes Years. So buy the DVD and watch it because it's amazing. So Rick Wakeman says this: there could be a yes in existence way after I'm dead and buried. In the same way, there will be a New York Philharmonica or a Boston Symphony Orchestra. How cool is that?
Well, he's kind of explained it in that quote that yes is an orchestra performing pieces of music not necessarily written by the people in the band at that time.
Exactly.
The music is forever.
Exactly.
As long as you can play it, then there can be numerous different lineups and orchestras.
And he's raising an important subject there. Should a rock band simply end when one of the classic members dies, or when the lead singer, the famous lead singer, is not part of it anymore? Like, can we have Pink Floyd without Roger Waters? Kind of stuff that people keep saying. And the answer seems to be yes, because they're still around with different members, and I would come to see them, and if I had the chance, and imagine they all now imagine they all in 20 years from now, no one is around, most members died, and they still and there's still a band officially under the name Yes. Because they currently have 2 bands under the name Yes. It's interesting, but so if you still have a band officially using the brand, playing the classic songs, because in the end we want to hear what the classic lineup has produced. If someone can play to that standard, why not call them Yes? Why does it have to be a tribute band? As any orchestra is still carrying the same name, why can't we have that as a rock band? That's an interesting point.
I find what's so interesting about it is that actually, in not in my opinion, but from what I determine rock and roll to be, I would say, okay, rock and roll is keeping the same band, and if someone sort of drops out, well then the band's not the same anymore. But Yes are quite clearly contradicting that opinion I have.
Yeah.
Yet they are, in the proggy terms, as rock and roll as anyone.
Because they had that philosophy that the music was above them. The music meant
bigger, more than the person, than the people.
Yes, exactly.
Well, so that's a huge statement, and it's something that I'm really inclined to agree with, because again, how many hundreds of years has it been since Beethoven and Mozart passed away? Yet we still have people who we don't know the names of playing their music.
Are they playing the way the original guys played? We don't know.
No, you're right.
With rock music, you can compare because you have the records. But even though it's still like anyone who's going to play that music is going to add their personality. So another thing that has everything to do with this subject is something that John Anderson said about the lineup changes, which I'm not going to quote like exactly as he said because I don't remember, but it's from the same documentary. It's something that really, really resonated with me. So he basically said, it's like you hop on a bus, and the bus is going somewhere, and you know where the bus is going. You know the direction of that bus, and you decide that you don't want to go there anymore. What do? You leave the bus, and someone else is going to hop into the bus, and they're going to follow the direction that everyone in that bus is following. So basically, what he's saying, the lineup changes like that. We are in this bus. The bus is going where it needs to go, and the person who joins us at that moment in time is more important for the project than the person that is leaving. And that's the truth. Someone is leaving, they're going to do something else, they're going to get into another bus, and we're going to do what we're doing. So they were really, really
can I tell you the word I would say? Well, yeah, practical. I was going to say confident.
It's like, okay, we need to move on.
Especially using that analogy, if he is really comparing Yes to a bus and a destination, which I think is more than a fair comparison, he is saying what you've just said, which is the music matters more than the people. Yeah. Which is a huge statement. And confidence in the music.
Yeah, especially when you consider how accomplished they were as musicians. Yeah. They could be more self-indulgent, but they were actually not in that sense. Some people would say they were, but anyway, music press never liked them. The magazines and the newspapers who had every time the music press was talking about, yes, they were very critical, and they would say awful things about them being self-indulgent, the songs being too long, etc. But rock and roll is musical freedom, as we stated many times, and that's what it is. So how did that start? I mean, the whole thing. The first two actual members of Yes were Chris Squire, bass player, and John Anderson, who's a singer who occasionally played acoustic guitar. He played.
Oh, right.
The thing is, John Anderson plays loads of instruments, and he's a great composer, songwriter, and he had loads of good ideas. But he was working in a bar in London.
Oh, really?
And Chris Squire played a gig at the old Marquee Club. We've just been to...
Is that where we were?
Not that one.
Oh, right.
We just had breakfast at the Montague Pike, which is the last is the last incarnation of the Marquee Club.
Oh, brilliant.
So well, it's in Soho. It's still the same kind of postcode, same place, but not the exact same venue. But the Marquee Club is where Chris Squire was performing with the band, and he was really good. The musicians are good, but the music was going nowhere. The guy who owned this bar where John Anderson worked said, "Do you know what?" Said to Chris Squire, "You're really good. You should get together with my friend John. He's got some really good songs."
That's how it
and
started.
that was it. That's how they started.
Fantastic.
And they started writing stuff together and gathering musicians and trying to find the best people to play that kind of music. And so the idea was, whatever they were doing was a natural progression from the 60s sound, from the Beatles and all that stuff.
Now that's really funny, because one of the notes I've made, because I told you I'm not versed that well in prog music, all I've heard really is I quite like prog metal.
Yeah.
So I listen to a lot of Dream Theater and Opeth and stuff, but prog as we know it, the 70s, where prog was starting to thrive, I don't really know much about. So the only ones I know a lot about now are Yes, because we're doing them now, and Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And one thing I found really interesting comparing them was that Emerson, Lake and Palmer, if you removed the prog, if you remove the progressive or prog rock label, what's the next label that comes after? For me, classical music. For Yes, if you remove the prog label, what's the next genre after? Pop.
Wow.
I found, when I was listening to Yes, like I said 5 minutes ago, I was hearing so many pop elements, and we chatted before we'd done this episode about the album 90125, which I know you're going to go into more later, but that was the moment where you said Yes actually took quite a step in making pop music.
Yeah.
And you can hear that.
You can even consider that a complete different incarnation of the band. Some people call it West Yes, because they were based in America and kind of, or whatever, but the whole thing is that's a different...
Yeah, but I just found it interesting you were saying they were taking their influences
but
from
even
the
though it's
Beatles.
still... You know why when you say it's pop makes sense? Because Bill Bruford said they took loads of ideas from TV music. Like country music, bam, 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 bam. That's Yours Is No Disgrace, that riff. He said it was like the kind of cowboy movies kind of soundtrack or TV stuff. So they
What's
were
that for the playlist? Yours Is No Disgrace.
Yours Is No Disgrace.
As usual, guys, this will all be on the playlist at the bottom of the show notes. So if you want to listen along whilst you're hearing this episode, or listen after or before, then the playlist will be at the bottom of the show notes.
Yeah, so I think it's relevant to say how the classical lineup, the classic lineup came together. So basically, when Chris Squire joined John Anderson for songwriting stuff, he was working with a guy called Peter Banks on guitar in his band, so he brought him in to join the band. So the first lineup would include Peter Banks on guitar, and then they got Tony Kaye on keyboards and Bill Bruford on drums. Bill Bruford put an advert on the Melody Maker magazine, and he was looking for a band, and I think he said something like jazz drummer looking for a band. He was into jazz, and he always considered that jazz is like the most interesting, complex way of expressing yourself musically. That was his thing, is always been his thing. And he said, I don't remember calling them. I think they got in touch with me because I put an advert. It's kind of, I wouldn't get in touch with anyone.
Yeah.
So Bill Bruford was contacted by the other members and joined the band. So as you said, you had Tony Kaye playing like mainly piano and Hammond, and you have Bill Bruford as a jazz drummer, and you have Chris Squire and John Anderson with classical music influences and Beatles vocals and kind of stuff. And
it's a lovely blend. It all comes together.
It is. So the first rehearsal was not far from where we are now. They rehearsed in Shaftesbury Avenue in June of 1968. So
for those listening, I know we always tell you normally where we are. I think the listeners, Felipe, have now figured out that when there's car horns, scaffolding, people talking, banging, we're in Soho. We're in the busy, beautiful Soho. When there's tractors, birds singing, we're in the countryside at my place, aren't we? It's fantastic.
What a contrast.
So if it's quiet in the background, you know we're recording at mine in the country, and if it's got the hustle and bustle of London, then we're at Felipe's in Soho. So they just recorded down the road.
Literally, Shaftesbury Avenue is about 5 minutes walk from here. So they were rehearsing at the basement of a cafe.
Amazing.
How cool is that? And so the name came up in a conversation where John Anderson said, why don't we call the band Life? They wanted like one word. And then Chris Squire said, World. And then, what's his name? The guitar player, Peter Banks, said, yes. Because he was agreeing with Chris Squire. He said, World. And I said, yes. And they said, oh, that's a good name. I said, no, I just said yes. And that was it. So that isn't that part of like the band's natural creativity? You know, they're very spontaneous with coming up with ideas and mixing them up. So they had, according to Bill Bruford, he would stick to his jazz roots and play a jazz beat underneath whatever the guys were doing. So they had vocals in the style of the Beatles and like vocal harmonies and stuff, and he would just keep what he thought was a jazz beat, or he was intending to do that. So basically that's again total musical freedom. They didn't care about they wanted a good final result, a good song, but they wouldn't be worried about labeling that, oh, it has to be more country or it has to be more folk. No, we're just going to play. And one big issue for them at the beginning was they were recording different parts of songs, like playing live, but playing just one section of a song, and that's it. Next day they record another one. So they spent a lot of time mixing, and they would have to learn the songs afterwards. So they never actually played songs start to finish until the album was ready. So they were doing, and so
but it's a huge achievement to take that to a live setting and play that music.
Isn't it what Queen did with Bohemian Rhapsody? They recorded the parts separately, and
then it came together.
They had to learn the song.
Yeah.
So the first album called Yes was released in August 1969 by Atlantic Records. At the time, the record labels were owned by record collectors, and they didn't care. It's like they didn't give a flying fuck.
Yeah.
They were like, play your thing.
Yeah.
And now we'll release it. Because I don't know if it's going to sell or not. I don't care.
Yeah.
You're the artist. So Atlantic Records would give them the freedom to do that kind of stuff. So the first album came out. Then they released.
What a lovely world that would have been.
Oh,
I think of that Simpsons episode where the guy's like, "Can you imagine a world without lawyers?" And then he goes to the dream and everyone's holding hands and there's a peace sign everywhere. Can you imagine the music industry without record label executives? Just everyone strumming guitars and having fun.
Exactly.
That would have been great.
And it wasn't a commercial music anyway. They sold millions of copies. So it makes us think about, do we need to fit music into these boxes of, this is pop, this is country, this is rock. I mean, they didn't have that concept at the time, and so they released an album after that called Time on the Word, which is a great album as well, and that's where Peter Banks decided to leave the band because he wasn't happy, many reasons, but one of them, he wasn't happy with the use of an orchestra in one of the songs.
Ooh, that's interesting. Why is that?
Because people had an idea in them. That's the kind of music I was like. I'm into rock music. There's no orchestra in rock music, right?
Interesting.
So especially Chris Squire and John Anderson, they were like, we need to be creative. We need to push the boundaries as much as possible. So anyone who wouldn't agree to that concept of being always creative, always exploring new ideas, would be kicked out of the bus, or would naturally leave the bus.
Because then,
because I don't want to do this. Then it wouldn't
work together. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So the album charted on number 45 in the UK charts, which is pretty good.
Is that the second album?
Yeah. Then, that was the second album, but they recorded the Yes album still with Peter Banks on guitar.
Any of those first two albums, any songs for our listeners? Any classic?
Do you know what? The first one, I'm not really a big fan.
but is there any song that is
Beyond
known?
and Before, Yesterday and Today, those songs are good. But because there's a song. I was expecting the song to be in the album, to be honest, but it's not here. Is it No Opportunity Needed or something like that? I forgot the name of the song. It's a cover song they played live. They did a really cool live version, but I think it's not on the first album. Now, if we go into the second album, Time and a Word, the song Time and a Word is fabulous. Yeah, No Opportunity Needed, No Experience Necessary, I think that's the name of the song, which is a cover. That's on the second album. That's it. I don't know much about the first one. So Time and a Word and No Opportunity Necessary, which songs from the second album, Time and a Word, are the ones I recommend.
In those terms. Brilliant. Will they be in the playlist?
I would say those mainly. Okay, so they found their sound for real on the Yes album, which is the third album. Here's an interesting thing: if you buy the album today, you're probably going to see Steve Howe in the album cover, but Peter Banks recorded, if I'm not wrong, all of it. But Peter Banks was still. I need to confirm who actually recorded the guitars, but Peter Banks was still in the album cover for the UK version, and they have Stephen Howard from the American version.
Oh, that's crazy!
It's actually Stephen Howard on guitar.
Let
me confirm that was Stephen Howard on guitar on this album for the first. That's the first album with the classic lineup, really, and it's where we have those sections of songs mixed together. And the interesting thing about them having Stephen Howard is like, okay, now we have a guy who is not afraid of playing with an orchestra. As a guy who's not afraid of experimenting, and he had this vast knowledge of acoustic instruments. He owns hundreds of acoustic guitars from different countries, different tunings and different stuff. Yeah. So he would experiment with those things and record them. So from the Yes album, Yours Is No Disgrace is the first track of the album, and is one of the best tracks. The Clap is just Steve Howe on guitar. It's a solo guitar piece, and it's a masterpiece. So it's all about him, really.
There was a few songs like this over the albums I listened to where there was just 2 minutes of Steve Howe just playing beautiful acoustic guitar.
That he mentions the fact that he wanted to play acoustic guitar with a band was at the time, because of performing live would be really hard to amplify an acoustic guitar.
Yeah, I suppose,
Every time a band would come up with acoustic guitar parts, like the whole band stops, there's a bit of acoustic guitar. So they would use that in studio, like, just let's focus on the acoustic guitar, and then the whole band comes in. But he was also willing to have the acoustic guitar with the band, which happens in Roundabout on Fragile album, if you listen to it. But so I recommend a few songs that I think everyone should listen to. Actually, the whole Yes album is just beautiful. But Yours No Disgrace, The Clap, and Starship Trooper. And I've Seen All Good People. The first 4 songs of the album, they're like perfect.
Brilliant.
It's like,
I did listen to Starship Trooper the other day, and it was really nice. I thought there were so many lovely variations in the melodies and the structure as well. What else did I write about that song? So what I did is I listened to, first of all I went onto Yes's Spotify profile, and they have the most popular songs, and I listened to the first 8, and they were Owner of a Lonely Heart, Roundabout, I've Seen All Good People, Love Will Find a Way, Changes, Sweetness, Long Distance Runaround, Leave It, and then Starship Trooper. What was interesting is that out of those first 8 songs, Starship Trooper was the first one that had a solo in.
Really?
It was, I mean, some of the stuff Rick Wakeman does.
Yeah.
Well, some of the stuff Rick Wakeman does is solo-y, but it was
solo-y,
as a solo. There was a dedicated portion of time given to an instrument, given to a member to show their skills.
Yeah.
Starship Trooper was the first one I heard. Now it was just very interesting because something you associate prog bands a lot with is the soloing and the wankiness, as we said, and being able to show off. But I felt Yes were so tasteful when it comes to their take on prog. It wasn't about the wankiness, it wasn't about the soloing, it wasn't about, the virtuosisticness of their instruments. It was just beautiful music.
Now that you mentioned that, one of my favourite things about Heart of the Sunrise, which is a great song, is the fact there's no solos. It's like 11-minute long song.
Yeah,
and
that was another one I listened to.
Yeah, and it's not because it's not like the guitar doesn't do something interesting, but everything they do is melodies.
Yeah,
it's like a proper composition, like an orchestral piece all the time. So, and obviously the whole. So I think that's where the whole thing actually started. So, clarifying what I said. You had Peter Banks up to the second album only, and Stephen Howard played every single track on the Yes album. So that's where the classic lineup started from. And I recommend, again, listen to Yours No Disgrace if you have time to listen to one song. And it's fantastic. The album charted number 4 in the UK and 40 in the US, which was pretty good. So then from that point onwards, Yes becomes a famous band. Let's put it like that. So obviously there's more money coming in, they can experiment even more.
Yeah.
And then Tony Kaye gets... Again, no, I need to correct myself here. It's not the classic lineup because we still haven't got Rick Wakeman.
Yeah.
He gets into the picture right now when Tony Kaye gets sacked from the band for the reasons you've mentioned before. He didn't want to experiment with the new keyboards and synths that were coming up at the time. So again, listen, the same reason for Peter Banks to be sacked from the band was the reason used to sack Tony Kaye. It's like, you're not experimenting enough. We want more.
Yeah, you don't want to go willing. Where this bus is going.
Exactly,
yeah.
and we're always going forward. We're always going to a new territory. That's it. That defines Yes. It's always some sort of new territory. We don't want to get stuck with what we did in the last album. So Tony Kaye said it was a very kind of friendly departure, that he wanted to do something else. And they saw Rick Wakeman playing with a band that was supporting them live, and they were like really impressed with his skills. Rick Wakeman. It's
hard not to be impressed by Rick Wakeman.
Yeah, what did you know about Rick Wakeman? You told me you knew him before you.
He did an album about like medieval. What's it called? Like, is it Knights at the Round Table or something like that? No, he did.
There's one about
something
about
like
King
that,
Arthur.
isn't it? King Arthur, yeah.
And the Knights of the Round Table.
I just know he's a phenomenal keyboard player. He's guested on a few bands that I like's albums. I don't know what they are. I just know the guy as being the keyboard wizard.
That's
honestly,
it.
There's a few people you put in the sentence with him. Maybe Keith Emerson, John Lord, and Rick Wakeman. They are the 3 prog keyboard masters, aren't they?
Yeah, you don't have that many people who can do that kind of stuff as he did. I think the interesting thing about him is he was already doing sessions for David Bowie, Elton John, Cat Stevens,
Cat Stevens is one of my favourite artists. I didn't know he played for Cat.
Yeah, he played with all those guys.
Oh,
and when they first called him, he said, "No, I got too many sessions. No one joined the band. I don't want to be in bands anymore."
Imagine turning sessions down. Yeah.
And the funniest thing is, he joined the band for they convinced him to come and rehearse, and he said on the very first rehearsal they came up with Roundabout and Heart of the Sunrise.
Wow.
Like as a jam.
Do you know what? That's really interesting. Talking about that, I did want to talk about. So I've made notes about when I listened to the Fragile album. Again, like just for listeners, my reference to prog is Emerson, Lake and Palmer, because this is the extent of what I know prog. Comparing it to Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Yes, and the album Fragile, it had so many more jamming elements than organised prog. There are sections of the song Roundabout where I thought, well, hold on now, like the bass and the drums have just let loose and now they're going on this little jam. And then Steve Howe comes in with this cool riff somewhere. You can tell the music was organised, as you mentioned in the studio, the amount of time they spent mixing it.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about the music as a product, the album. but the music in musical terms feels like a band jamming.
It's quite loose, isn't it?
It is, and it doesn't feel as organised as I would normally label prog to be.
It's rather fragile.
Yeah.
I think
if we're talking about Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and yes, Emerson, Lake and Palmer seem organised. The prog, the music they play, it's very, very technical, and I can imagine them being in the rehearsal room, being in the writing room, saying, right, after this section we need to go here, and what we're going to do is we're going to do these notes here. Whereas with Yes, I feel like it's like, okay, Chris and Bill, why don't you just groove for a bit and we'll see what we do. That's what it feels like.
It does sound like it
hearing.
Started like that, doesn't it? Even when they get to a final form of a song.
Yeah.
It still feels like they were jamming, at least when they were writing it.
I think that's reflected in the song.
Yeah.
I feel like they've left the best parts of the jams in the songs.
Totally. I mean, on Fragile, there's an interesting point you're talking about. Being loose and being able to play whatever you want. There's 5 solo tracks in the album. You might not even have noticed. What I mean by solo tracks is each of the band members created and organized a song by themselves. They might have other band members playing them, but I think it's mainly like one musician playing his ideas. So there's one song written by Bill Bruford, one by Rick Wakeman, another one by John Anderson, and then Chris Squire and Steve Howe. Yeah. So they all did solo pieces in the album, and it's like it's half of the album.
Yeah,
half of the album is done as a solo thing, and it still sounds like a band. The whole. I
did actually read that on my notes. You're right. Half of the album was written as a band, and the other half was every member took a song.
And it was the first album. It's an important point. It was the first album where Roger Dean did the art for the cover. He came up with the logo and the whole visual concept for the tours, and that they carried on working with him for years and years.
I think visual. What word did you use? Visual.
Concept?
Yeah, the visual concept for a band, especially a prog band, is so important, because when you go to see a prog band live, it's a long experience, isn't it? Because when you think of going to see a pop band, I saw the Killers are in England. They're this week doing a tour. You think how many songs the Killers have where audiences can sing along to the choruses. The singer can sing the first line and give the mic to the audience for the second line. It's an immersive experience seeing a pop band.
Yeah.
Seeing a prog band is like going to watch a movie at the cinema. You have to pay attention, and it matters if you're there from the start.
It's like going to watch a 3-hour movie.
But it is because, but visually, if you're going to watch 5 men play technically challenging music, you can expect for their performance to be of a lesser degree. I don't expect Steve Howe to be headbanging and throwing his hands up in the air during the technical side. So you have to bear with them. You have to say, I'm in this for the long haul. And that's where I think that... No, I'm just saying that's where the visual concept comes in, because whilst you're not watching the men headbang, you're seeing the beautiful visual concept that Roger Dean came up with.
Yeah.
Just a little something I want to say, because I was watching some videos of Tool, the metal band Tool play the other day, and they're the same. They're a heavier prog band, but their visuals are fantastic.
And it's probably inspired by the 60s and 70s.
I think,
because you have so basically everything you do visually in the show is to enhance the music. It's more about the music than the musicians.
Yeah. Exactly.
Although everything they do individually is really hard to play.
Yeah.
Interesting, isn't it? So they charted number 7 in the UK with Fragile. So going back to the timeline, we're very loose with the approach of the show. We don't want to. It's not a history lesson. But I want to go through some of the important moments in their history, and so as I said, they charted 7 in the UK and 4th in the US, and that was a big deal. Roundabout was a hit for them, for prog rock fans, and that took them into a natural next step, which is Close to the Edge is an album with only 3 songs, and 2 of my favorite songs by Yes are on that album. And it's just the title song, Close to the Edge, is a masterpiece. And have you listened to that?
Beautiful, yeah, I listened to that yesterday. It is wonderful. There's just so many. It's 3 songs within a song.
Yeah.
But it's beautifully executed. And one issue I have with prog music, and actually to an extent, it's not just prog. It can be prog metal or just long metal. You know, that don't have. It's when you're writing a long song. For me, there has to be not legitimate. There has to be a logical movement from one part of the song to another.
Yeah.
And I feel sometimes prog music is guilty of, okay, well, we finished this section, what should we do next? Bit in 7/8 in a different key, let's go for it. And then as a listener, I'm sat there going, well, hold on, it didn't really make sense to go from that part of the song to this part of the song.
Yeah.
You needed something in between, in my opinion. But yes, when I heard Close to the Edge, it was just one long 18-minute masterful piece of music.
It is.
And everything made sense. All the transitions were logical, going from one part to another. Seamless execution from the musicians. The musicianship is stunning. It's a wonderful album.
As simple as it sounds, Rick Wakeman defined what they were doing as a search for emotion.
Really?
And he said every time someone criticized them, he said we're going to prove that we can do better, and we're going to do what the critics don't like, which is emotion. So he said, and you and I, which is a beautiful song from Close to the Edge, is the ultimate achievement in terms of delivering emotion in a prog rock song. I don't even know if they would consider themselves prog, because prog musicians never say that. But anyway, so that was the point. An interesting point about Close to the Edge is when Alan White first joined the band. Without joining the band, Bill Bruford wasn't present in one of the recording sessions, and he jammed along with them. Oh, so he was there. He was a session guy. Everyone knew him from the work he did with John Lennon and all this stuff. And he came up and he played a couple of songs. He jammed, and they said it was so natural. He was such a friendly guy, easy to work with. And obviously they had a few options when Bruford decided to leave the band, and they said, well, let's go for Alan White, who already jammed with us and it sounded good.
Yeah.
And Bill Bruford, again, listen, Bill Bruford thought wasn't challenging enough for him. It wasn't experimenting.
Jazz drummer, isn't it? And I can understand that from a jazz, looking at him as a jazz drummer.
But he wanted to go even more down into the prog concept.
Really?
Yeah, so he joined King Crimson.
Oh, right. So, yeah. I was just gonna ask you, where do you go from Yes to get more proggy? And there was only one more answer. Yeah, King Crimson.
Exactly. He wanted to experiment even more.
I think something interesting I found about the members is the classic lineup.
So
it was always. I said this to you earlier. Before I knew who Yes were, I knew who they were. If that makes sense. Yeah. I'd heard of Steve Howe on his own. I'd heard of Bill Bruford on his own, and Chris Squire and Rick Wakeman. John Anderson was actually the one gentleman I hadn't heard of. But it's only when I did my research this week that I was like, oh my God, Steve Howe on guitar. Oh, Bill Bruford. Chris Squire. It's like all these guys I know of.
Yeah, because their names are so big in the
this is what
industries.
Yes has done for them.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, they've done it for themselves, but under the guise of Yes.
Yeah, and that's why guys like Rick Wakeman kept coming back to the band. He left the band so many. I can't keep count of it.
Really?
He probably have left the band about 10 times and joined them back. Wow. It's like because it's like he always felt comfortable playing with them. So it's like if I ever want to be in a band, it's going to be Yes. He's a guy who likes his solo stuff. So, so basically, those two albums, if you wanna, because the three albums with the not the classic lineup, because you still have Tony Kaye on Yes album, but the three albums you have to listen to is the Yes album, Fragile, and Close to the Edge. It's one after the other, and you can see where they're going with their music.
Yeah.
After that, they released a live album called Yes Songs. And then they did Tales from Topographic Oceans, which, according to Rick Wakeman, not the exact words, but he says too much wanking in the album. He didn't want to go that way. He thought it was a bit too much. He didn't like the direction. Also, on his 25th birthday, his first solo album achieved #1.
Wow. So
he said it was a really, really strong feeling. You've got your solo album reaching #1.
Yeah.
And you're leaving the band that you love and you've played with for 2 amazing albums. So
That's special, yeah.
Yeah, so he left the band to focus on his solo career. Also, he was spotted eating a burger whilst everyone else in the band was vegetarian. I don't know how much relevance
Sacrilege.
it has. Yeah, but yeah, so he quit the band, or they kicked him out. I don't know, but he left the band, and his first solo album is called "Journey to the Center of the Earth." And
That's the one I've heard of. Yeah, no, it's fantastic.
A masterpiece, and they had so we can't really go through all the lineup changes. I want to just give a few names that were relevant. One of them was Pat Moraz, Swiss piano player, keyboard player, who joined after Rick Wakeman left. So they released an album called Relayer, which is kind of more jazz fusion compared to what they did before. And guess what? They sacked the guy and hired Rick Wakeman again for the next album called Going for the One, which I totally love. I think it's a beautiful album, really, really good. And that was number 1 in the UK and number 8 in the US. The song Going for the One is amazing. The title track, and Turn of the Century as well from the same album. It's the brilliant songs. I totally recommend. Loads of really good acoustic work.
Excellent.
And the vocal harmonies in this album are
lovely. Well, they'll be on the playlist. One album that is really important to talk about is the one you mentioned. I don't know if we're getting there on your notes.
No, we're going to get there. I'm kind of following the notes, but I'm just like...
it's important. No, this is good, man. Because I have no idea about the journey. It's really nice to hear.
Yeah, I needed to organise the ideas for this specific episode, because the Yes has done so much. I think it's 22 studio albums.
Wow.
As I said before, 19 musicians. And it's...
An extensive career, isn't it?
And we want to give people an overall idea of what Yes is all about. So you do your research and listen to it and go for the albums. But so basically, there's an interesting transition from that prog rock music into pop music. So Yes becomes a complete different band in the late 80s. So they did a couple of albums after that, and to a certain point, they reached a certain point where Steve Howe, Chris Squire and Alan White were looking for a heavier sound, kind of more hard rock stuff. And at this point, Rick Wakeman leaves again, and John Anderson leaves with him. So they did an album called Drummer with Jeff Downis and Trevor Horn. So Trevor Horn was the singer, Jeff was the keyboard player. They were in another band, they had a few hits, and they just joined Yes. And the thing with Trevor Horn was he was a big fan of John Anderson, and he struggled to be John Anderson live, to sing the old material. So he finally decided to become a producer, and he played a big role as Yes producer.
Wow.
So he was a singer for one album, and then he became the producer. So, but the band kind of splits in December 1980, and that's really interesting. Chris Squire and Alan White, they joined Jimmy Page and started a band called XYZ, which means X, Yes, Zeppelin. So the band went nowhere. They didn't find a singer. They were not happy to do just instrumentals, and they didn't release anything until...
Oh, well, they tried.
They tried.
They gave it a go.
And then they end up finding a guy called Trevor Rabin, who is an essential member of this pop phase of the band. So he joined Squire and White and brought Tony Kaye back into the band. The band was called Cinema. Wasn't Yes, it was a new band. So that's why they were even more free to do whatever. And they became a pop band naturally. So got this young, good-looking shredder on guitar, like fantastic guitar player. Sounds like Van Halen. It's like fantastic, great musician called Trevor Rabin. And he was in charge of it, with Trevor Horn, the former singer, producing. So the album 90125, which the name of the album came from the catalog serial number.
Brilliant. I was wondering what
and it was their biggest selling album. 3 million copies in the US alone. So from that point, so the number one hit they had was Owner of a Lonely Heart. Loads of people who are not familiar with Yes, they know that song.
Yeah.
It's a pop song.
I didn't know it was Yes. I knew the chorus, I didn't know it was Yes.
Can we do a segment here?
Yeah,
Can
sure.
we do a Felipe Unleashed?
Let's do it. Right here, ladies and gentlemen, time for Felipe Unleashed.
Owner of a Lonely Heart is a great song. And Yes was a fantastic pop band.
That's the Unleashed.
That is, because the prog rock fans hate the pop era, and I think it's just...
So did you purposely say the opposite of what Yes fans would normally say?
Yes.
Owner of a Lonely Heart is a shit song, and Yes are a prog band. Is that what the Yes fans would say? Excellent, brilliant.
I mean, we don't want this episode to last forever, so I'm just gonna
just quickly though, it's a lovely song. It's a fantastic pop song.
Yeah.
But I still feel you have the Yes personality in there.
You do, because it's
prog
pop.
Yeah. One thing I want to add to this, just in terms of where I heard Yes sort of going after this.
Yeah.
There were 3 bands who, when I listened to these Yes songs, came to my mind. Band number 1, Tramp. Do you know Tramp?
Yes, I know them. Yeah. They are
just the poppy prog side,
yes,
isn't
exactly.
it?
Prog
the second band that came to my head, and this is after hearing the more poppy songs of Yes, Toto.
There you go.
Just that 80s kind of synth-based stuff, very agreeable melodies, 3-part harmonies, very structured, very organised. And the third band, and this is actually just because of one song, Jamiroquai.
Wow.
The start of Roundabout really, I haven't got the exact time code, but I think it was somewhere in the first 3 minutes of Roundabout. I thought this could be funky Jamiroquai.
Well, you know what? That bass line is quite funky.
That's what I'm saying.
Beezy as fuck.
I just found it really interesting that if you're going to compare, when we did ELP, we were talking about their live album where they only did classical music. I just like that with Yes, you get a bit of everything. Yeah. You get the funk. What song was it here? I put distorted. South Side of the Sky from the Fragile album had some really hard rock riffs in there.
Yeah.
You got your hard rock, you got your funk, you got the prog, you got the classical elements, you got the acoustic stuff.
Yeah.
This to me is as good of a definition as a prog band as I've ever heard, because they put everything in.
Well, that's why they're so loved and hated.
Yeah,
because they've done everything. They've been around for the last probably 20 years. They've been like recycling the old sound every now and then, being more proggy.
Right.
And John Anderson left the band and got a new singer. They got like it's too much going on for the last few years. But I think if you understand where they came from and all the way to the point they became a pop band and they went back to prog music. There's one point in the band's history which I think it's phenomenal. 1991, they recorded an album called Union. None of them liked the album, but that's not the point.
Yeah.
The point is they were split into 2 bands. So after the pop phase of the band, there was a band formed because John Anderson left after that, and he joined Rick Wakeman again. So the band was called Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, and Howard, and they had Tony Levin from King Crimson on the bass.
Oh wow,
what a band!
Yeah, that's a long band name though.
Yeah, it's an awful name. So, but
that's worse than Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, isn't
exactly, but they didn't want. They were doing that and all the adverts for the tour like performing the music of Yes, whatever. So they wanted to promote that as a version of Yes. They couldn't use the name. So you have that band, and on the other side you had Alan White, Chris Squire, Trevor Rabin, Tony Kaye.
Is this what you said at the start of the episode about 2 acts?
Yeah, so you have 2 acts together performing the music of Yes. In 1991, they came together and did a Union tour as an 8-piece band. Wow. 2 keyboard players, 2 drummers, 2 guitar players, and 1 bass, 1 vocals.
That's nice that they come together, isn't it? And reconcile in that sense.
Well, at that point in time, we have every single member of Yes, apart from Jeff Donner's... what's his name? Trevor Horn and Pat Morass. Okay. So apart from 3 guys, and Peter Banks, of course, yeah. Apart from 4 guys, you have everyone who has ever played in the band until that point, which is a lot of people. So 8 people, and they performed a whole tour in America with a circular stage that would.
Oh, brilliant! In the round,
yeah,
fantastic.
Perfect, and. It is just, for me, the live versions of those songs are great. I totally recommend the album. I totally recommend the documentary Years, which was recorded at that time, telling the story to that moment. The most relevant recent facts is in 2015, Chris Squire passed away, and
Alan White passed away yesterday.
yes, and Alan White. So they probably grooving in heaven now. So I'd like to dedicate this show to them, to Chris Squire and Alan White.
Okay. Should we end with a segment?
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. Well, just to finish off this episode, Felipe is going to give us his top 5. Felipe is going to give us his top 5 songs and his top 3 albums. So take it away, bro.
Okay, top 5 songs.
These will all be in the playlist as usual.
Yeah, top 5 songs. Going for the One. Again, for the beautiful vocal harmonies, great drumming. It's a fantastic track. Number 4 would be Yours No Disgrace.
Nice.
Lovely. It's got everything. Number 3, Close to the Edge.
Yeah, I love that one.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Second, And You and I.
Nice.
It's one of the most beautiful love songs ever written. It's Prog.
Yeah.
And number 1 for me, Heart of the Sunrise.
Yeah, that's the last song on the Fragile album.
Fragile, yeah.
Yeah, lovely.
It's the last,
Lovely
yeah,
song.
it's just a masterpiece. Everyone should listen to it. And it's the one with no solos, all composition, and every instrument tells a story. That song is just beautiful.
Fantastic.
Top 3 albums for you guys. The Yes album would be my number 3. Going for the One would be my number 2. Probably not an obvious choice, and most Yes fans would disagree with me. Some people don't like the album. I love it. I think it's a really cool album. And number 1 for me is, the classic Close to the Edge. 3 songs, you don't need more than that. They are just phenomenal pieces of music.
Yeah, I don't think we've said enough, but if you put the time and effort and dedication into a song, it's about quality, not quantity.
Yeah.
You don't need 10 songs in an album if you can do as well as you do with 3, isn't it?
Exactly.
Anyway, right, man, thank you so much, because obviously, listeners, I'm sure you're familiar now that I'm normally the one that comes with all the information and this and that, but Felipe's really taken sort of a hold of this episode because he loves Yes. I don't know much about them, and it's been really amazing, man, so thank you for guiding us through the career of Yes, because what a fantastic band. And I think the thing that's stuck with me most of all from this episode is the quote you said that John Anderson, Yes as an entity are a bus heading in a direction.
Yeah.
And through the years, people were helping the bus. They were on the bus, getting it to its destination. And some people thought, well, do you know, I've been on the bus for a while and it's not right anymore. They've hopped off. They've come back on. Others have got off and never got back on. It's just fantastic. Last thing is that Yes, that bus is still going.
It's still going.
And that's what's cool.
And I hope Rick Wakeman's right. And after they all dead and buried, they'll have us. We still have Yes performing for people because the music is amazing, and maybe they are one of the few rock bands where the music is actually bigger than the musicians. Yeah. No matter how self-indulgent they are,
that's important with prog. You're right. Yeah. Final question to you: why are Yes so important to rock and roll?
For constantly moving forward in terms of their sound, never accepting to play the same thing in the same album, and for keeping an identity over so many lineup changes.
Yeah,
that's it. And again, that's it, because the music is bigger than the musicians. Fantastic. And I think they did that really well over the course of their career. So yeah, hats off to Yes.
Man. Beautifully said. As we said twice before, this episode is for Chris Squire and Alan White, so may they both rest in peace. Thank you very much for joining us again, guys. Another great episode. Again, thank you, Felipe, for all your efforts, man. That was really interesting. We're doing the normal thing now, as you know, you're probably used to it. Find us on the internet. Like, subscribe, share, all that stuff. But we're on the internet.
Where about?
www.google.com.
Oh, right.
And then you search from there, yeah.
Okay, Long Live Rock and Roll Podcast.
That's the one.
We are on the internet.
Excellent. Thank you very much, guys. Hope you had a good episode.
Thank you, and keep on rocking everywhere.
And as usual, long live rock and roll.